A tired bank clerk stares at his reflection, invisible to everyone around him, drowning in paperwork and dreams he'll never pitch to his famous animator boss. But tonight, everything changes, because a god's mask is about to turn his newborn baby into something impossible, something that will force him to fight a literal deity just to prove he deserves to be called father. On a stormy night, a figure tears through museum security like paper, and inside, a tour guide explains how an ancient artifact grants anyone the powers of Loki himself, god of mischief and chaos. But when the intruder reveals he is Loki, reclaiming what was stolen from him, he discovers the display holds only a fake, and in pure rage he rips the guide's face clean off and mounts it in the glass case like another exhibit, before blasting holes through the floor and sending guards plummeting into darkness. The real mask drifts down a river the next morning, found by a dog named Otis, who carries it home to his owners Tim and Tanya, a couple arguing about when they'll finally have a baby, though Tim keeps insisting the timing isn't right, never knowing that mask in his dog's mouth will answer that question in the most terrifying way possible. Meanwhile, Loki searches frantically because his father Odin has commanded him to retrieve the mask before it unleashes havoc on Earth, but he's already too late. The artifact is already in Tim's house, hidden and waiting. Tim struggles at work, pitching ideas to his boss Daniel, who dismisses every concept without interest. And that night, Tim comes home with an apology gift for Tanya, trying to smooth over their earlier fight about parenthood. But then his company announces a Halloween party, and he has no costume. So Tanya suggests using that weird mask Otis brought home. And Tim, desperate and out of options, puts it on at the party, and the artifact fuses to his skin instantly. He transforms into a living cartoon, a being with Loki's full power coursing through him, and he turns the boring corporate gathering into an explosive spectacle that leaves everyone speechless, especially his boss. And later that night, he brings that same wild energy home to Tanya, though the next morning he remembers absolutely nothing about what happened. His boss calls him in, praising the incredible performance and demanding Tim create a new animated series based on that character. And Tim rushes home with the news, but Tanya stops him with bigger information. She thinks she's pregnant, and when the doctor confirms it, Tanya suddenly vomits soap bubbles instead of bile, the first sign that something impossible has begun. Months pass, and their baby Alvi is born, but Loki's father, Odin, possesses a shopkeeper's body to warn his son that a child has been born with the mask's powers embedded in their very DNA, and Loki must find this infant immediately and recover the artifact before catastrophe strikes. Tim searches his house for the mask, hoping it will inspire his animation work, but Otis hid it in his doghouse after losing his bedroom to the new baby, jealous and resentful of being replaced. And while Tim tears apart rooms looking for it, Tanya plays with Alvi and inflates a balloon, and the baby's head suddenly inflates like rubber, revealing powers that shouldn't exist in any human child. But before Tanya sees it, Alvi returns to normal, though Otis watches from the corner, seeing everything and beginning to plot.
Loki transforms into a bee and infiltrates the hospital, terrorizing a receptionist by stabbing her with his stinger before stealing her form and accessing records of every baby born that day, starting his hunt through the city one infant at a time. Tim discovers fatherhood means sleepless nights and constant crying, so exhausted he nearly feeds Alvi a light bulb instead of a bottle until the baby uses powers to wake him. And the next morning, Tanya announces she has to travel for work for an entire week. The same week, Tim must present his cartoon officially to the network, leaving him completely alone with an infant he barely knows how to care for. His boss agrees to let him work from home, but Alvi screams endlessly and nothing calms him down. And when Tanya calls to check in, the baby says his first word, "Mommy," which thrills Tim until Alvi repeats it in a deep adult voice that freezes his father's blood with terror. Loki visits homes one by one, disguising himself as a vacuum salesman and testing each baby. But they're all normal children. None possess the powers he's hunting, though one throws a doll in his face before he moves on to the next address. Tim sits Alvi in front of the television, despite Tanya's rules against it, playing cartoons like the Flintstones and Woody Woodpecker. And it works. The baby goes quiet, so Tim rushes to finish work while asking Otis to watch him, but the dog ignores the order and digs in his doghouse to retrieve the mask he buried weeks ago.
That night, Tim falls asleep while Alvy watches a cartoon about a singing frog that performs only when alone, behaving like a normal animal whenever someone else looks, the episode ending with the owner committed to an asylum. And Otis finds the mask and transforms into a powered creature, planning to eliminate the baby who stole his room. Morning comes and Tim works desperately, but none of his ideas impress him, and then Alvy starts imitating the dancing frog cartoon, moving in ways physics shouldn't allow, and suddenly the baby gives himself Woody Woodpecker's head and races around the room at impossible speeds. Tim chases him while calling emergency services, trying to explain his son can do things that defy reality, but the operator thinks he's insane and hangs up, so Tim runs to his neighbor begging for help, explaining everything, but when he asks Alvy to perform again, the baby acts completely normal, just like the frog in the cartoon, showing nothing unusual in front of witnesses, and the neighbor accuses Tim of shaking his child and throws him out. Back home, Alvy grabs Tim's leg and smashes him against furniture like a rag doll, and Otis appears holding what looks like a toy but is actually lit dynamite, handing it to the baby who blows out the fuse and imitates an explosion sound before running away. And Otis celebrates thinking he succeeded until Alvy's gift, a giant bone, explodes in his mouth, though the mask's power keeps him alive. Otis constructs an elaborate crane system with ropes and pulleys, planning to extract the baby from the house permanently, and that evening he enters transformed and armed, which Tim sees right before fainting from shock, and the dog climbs to the ceiling using a plunger tied to rope, hooking a clamp to Alvy's diaper and preparing to activate the crane that will yank the child out through the window.
But Alvy hooks the clamp to Otis's collar instead without him noticing, and when the dog activates the machine, he's the one launched through the air, smashing through a piano, bursting through an air duct, hitting a ceiling fan, flying out a window and back in again, crashing into a bathtub, a birdhouse, and finally a washing machine that crushes him through its rollers until Alvy blows him out the window like a balloon, and Otis loses the mask, defeated and broken. The house is destroyed, but Tim continues dad duties, changing diapers, when Loki appears disguised as a delivery man, and Tim leaves Alvy with the stranger to open a package that shoots out a giant boxing glove, knocking him unconscious, though Loki sees nothing unusual about the baby and leaves. But moments later, Alvy spins his head backward and vomits green liquid across the car, confirming to the watching Loki that this is the son of the mask. Tim rushes to a children's hospital convinced his baby is possessed, and Loki follows but parks illegally, so a cop approaches and Loki simply knocks the officer out and slams his head into pavement before confronting Tim, demanding the mask with a giant axe raised. But Odin possesses a security guard to scold his son, giving Tim a chance to run, though Loki creates a massive iron wall blocking escape and summons an enormous grenade from a magician's suitcase, hurling it at father and child. Alvy transforms his arms into a shield, protecting them both from the blast, and Loki shifts to his true form, creating a fireball, but Odin intervenes by possessing Tim's body and firing electricity that strips Loki of his divine powers completely, and Alvy joins the fight, stretching his arms like rubber to smash Loki between trash cans before tossing him inside one, seemingly ending the threat. Tim gets called back to the studio to present his project, but arrives with nothing prepared. The producers fire him on the spot and throw him out, and he calls Tanya, admitting despite the horrible day, he's grateful he spent time with Alvy, and that night after bathing and putting the baby to bed, they both fall asleep, but Loki returns, sneaking into the nursery, drawing symbols on walls and summoning Odin, explaining Alvy is the true son of the mask and begging for his powers back, and Odin agrees, but gives him 1 hour to recover the artifact and fix everything. Loki regains his abilities, but the neighbor appears calling for Tim, so Loki scares her by turning his head into a gigantic nose, waking Tim, who rushes to the crib, finding Loki's face instead of his son. Then Tanya's voice calls out, but it's also Loki in disguise. And finally, the god reveals his plan, demanding Tim find the mask and bring it to the alley within 1 hour or never see Alvy again. Then Loki grabs the baby and escapes through the roof. Tanya arrives home finding ruins, and Tim attacks her thinking she's Loki before realizing his mistake and explaining everything. She doesn't believe until the neighbor appears with her enormous nose, proving the truth, and they search for Otis because only he knows where the mask is hidden, finding him romancing another dog while transformed, and Tim convinces him to help rescue Alvy, so Otis removes the mask and hands it over.
In the alley, Loki plays with Alvy, testing their powers in an imagined Wild West duel, the baby shooting a real gun that scares but doesn't hurt the god, who laughs at the joke until Tim and Tanya arrive, proposing an exchange, the mask for the baby, and Loki agrees, then breaks his word at the last second, keeping Alvy. But Otis charges, biting him, and the mask flies through the air. Tim catches it and transforms into his powered form, creating a super-powered car that Tanya and Otis jump into as they chase Loki at incredible speed. Loki flips a lever, making the road rise in massive waves, but Tim powers through. So Loki veers into a boxing arena, challenging Tim to a fight, and they trade blows with Loki's experience giving him advantage, until Tim smashes him with a suitcase, trapping him inside and throwing it into the sea. But when Tim reunites with Tanya, who found Alvy locked in a cage, Loki blocks their exit with a brick wall created by a giant pencil. Tim attacks with toy weapons, but Loki's magic pencil turns them to flowers. Then Loki swings the giant pencil, but Tim uses an enormous sharpener to grind it down, though the pieces reassemble and Loki reappears, proposing Alvy should choose who he wants, and Loki tries winning the baby with tricks and games, but Tim does something unexpected. He removes the mask and tells his son that because of him, he has become a better man and he's proud to be his father. And Alvy calls him Daddy for the first time, choosing his parents over Loki. Loki refuses defeat and summons a giant hammer to crush them all. Tim uses all his strength to lift it, but Loki makes drills burst from the hammer, injuring him severely. And just when everything seems lost, Odin appears, declaring Loki's time is up and preparing punishment for everything he's done. But Tim asks Odin to forgive his son, because that is what a father should do. And moved by those words, Odin spares Loki and takes him back to the realm of gods, retrieving the mask so it can never cause trouble again. The next day, Tim visits his former boss, showing an idea for a new animated project inspired by everything he experienced with his son. His boss loves it, and together they create a cartoon that becomes a massive success. And that night, during the show's premiere, Tim celebrates with his family. And shortly afterward, Tanya announces she's pregnant again, filling everyone with joy and hope for whatever impossible adventure comes next. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you liked the video, like and subscribe to Reelbrief for more movie recaps. See you on our next recap.